Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Historical Society's September History Live presentation. We are very excited to see all of you here tonight. We're broadcasting live from our museum in downtown San Francisco, and in addition to the people in the room, we have more than 100 people joining us online. So welcome to everyone who's watching from home as well. I understand that we have people from Florida, Virginia, and Washington State tonight. So welcome to everyone. I'd like to make a special thank you to our sponsors, the Canadian Women's Club of the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a great organization. If you don't know about it, it's perfect for anyone who's from Canada, interested in Canada, or just wants to meet some people from Canada. It's a membership organization, and they have delicious luncheons. I've been to some of them. Great presentations and special events here in San Francisco. So check them out and consider membership if you like. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce John Freeman, the chairman of the program committee, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Sitting here chatting with Scott, found out we overlap in a lot of ways, which I did not know. As we booked him, I didn't know anything, that we had gone to the same high school, that we had, I knew his dad and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, it's kind of an old home week kind of operation tonight. But we have as our speaker someone who is really not just somebody I have some affinity for because we have some similar backgrounds, but he's the guy when you want to know about coins. And he's going to tell us today not just what goes into coins, but what went on in this building. And we haven't talked about that topic very much, and what went on in so-called Gold Rush San Francisco that started the whole process of minting coins locally. There's more to that story. Scott will give you the rest of that story as well, but I'm ready to introduce Scott Griffin and his Coins That Tell the Story of San Francisco. I love your title.
Good evening and welcome. Those in the room, thank you very much, as well as those online. Thank you very much for attending this evening. I would also like to thank the San Francisco Historical Society for this opportunity, as well as the Canadian Women's Organization here in San Francisco. Thank you very much for your sponsorship. This evening, I'll be telling you a little bit about San Francisco as it's told through several coins that were produced in the two buildings that we're going to talk about. I'm really excited because I have this opportunity to talk about my two favorite things, coins and history. So looking forward to sharing with you all. First things first, a little bit of history about me. I started collecting coins as a young lad. My dad would get my sister and I at the kitchen table and we would start going through rolls of pennies and so forth. Much like I think many young people, you find yourself distracted, let's call it, with high school and college and maybe young adult life. I came back to collecting coins at the Alameda Flea Market one day in about the year 2000. I bought a few coins at the Alameda Flea Market. I still am in touch with the fellow that I bought the coins from. The next Monday, I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought a book. I wanted to see how I did, if I did okay with the coins that I bought, what I paid, so forth and so on. It was a single-digit number for each of the coins, a few silver dollars. Fast forward a couple more years and I bought 3 gold coins one day in 2002 on 16th and Mission Street. And half an hour later, I sold those same coins on 16th and Valencia, and I made $50. And after that, I was hooked. And I've been a professional coin dealer now for, 23 years. And I was associated with an organization where I was on the History and Archives Committee there. That was in 2007. That further spurred my interest in San Francisco history. In 2009, I organized the coin show at the old San Francisco Mint. Some of you in the room here tonight came to that show, I know. And previous to becoming a coin dealer, I was a Wells Fargo man for 18 years. I left my employment with the bank in 2008, and so I've been a full-time coin dealer now for 16 years. And it's been a lot of fun, again, being able to spend time, San Francisco history and coins, something very much that I enjoy. So the two mints that we're going to speak about this evening are the building that we're in here, and the coin that I've chosen to tell the story of this building is a $20 Liberty Gold coin dated 1856 that was on the SS Central America shipwreck. And the second coins that we're going to discuss will tell the story of the second San Francisco Mint, that being on 5th and Mission Street. And the two coins are the 1878S and the 1921S Morgan dollars. Here's a pretty good picture of San Francisco in 1847. We're lucky that we have the color version here in the room, and I didn't know that before tonight. This is a wonderful picture of San Francisco because this first street here that you can see that used to be the beach, that's Montgomery Street. And so Yerba Buena Cove at that point in time was water. And it wasn't until a few years later that piers were built, ships started coming in, and that area started to be filled with landfill so that it could become actual land. Here to the left, you can see there's no Sacramento Street yet. It looks like just a little creek, which is really interesting to me. And then there's California Street, seems like it goes up and to the right. So really, really cool spot for showing what San Francisco looked like in 1847. Here's the coin that we're talking about this evening. And you can see the insert here at the top left. It's what's called a gold foil insert. It's dated 1856, was a dash for S, which is of course San Francisco. The denomination is in the upper right corner, $20. The next line shows the company that graded that coin. This is PCGS, and then the grade is AU55. So AU stands for almost uncirculated, and within most grades there's a numerical designation, and in this case AU has 3 numerical designations, 53, 55, and 58, and this one is in the middle at 55. Further on this holder is denoted that it's the SS Central America provenance, and then it has some varietal descriptions there on the next line, and then the final line at the bottom shows this is an SS Central America coin, number 5161. There were about 10,000 coins salvaged from the SS Central America. And so this is number 5161. So this is the obverse. On the reverse of the coin, you can see here at around the 6 o'clock position and above 20D, you'll see the little S, and that's the mint mark showing San Francisco. San Francisco in 1856, a population of approximately 55,000. The gold rush is still on, and large amounts of gold are still being discovered, and this gold is now flowing east. Gold in this particular coin likely was found around the Sacramento area in the gold fields there. San Francisco at this point in its history is not developed like it is today. Most of the southwest parts of the city are just sand dunes. There's some development around China Basin, and of course in downtown areas, Nob Hill, Portsmouth Square, Telegraph Hill, so forth and so on. But much of San Francisco is not yet settled. Law and order is provided by a police force as well as several vigilante groups. And whole presentations can be made just on these law and order in San Francisco at this time and the stories of the vigilante groups and so forth. Again, the waterfront is made up of hastily assembled wooden piers and ships that have been brought to San Francisco. Their occupants have gone to Sacramento to go find treasure there, and they just abandoned these ships. And so these ships where the structures were used multi-purposed, if you will, for things like hotels, restaurants, offices, and so forth. And they would just latch these ships together or to the pier and use them for a secondary purpose. This particular mint that we're in tonight was opened for business in April 1854. This is a small and fairly cramped building for the processes that were taking place here, receiving large amounts of gold dust and nuggets, refining these, and then minting coins with the product. The mint's first superintendent was Dr. Louis Birdsall. He was succeeded shortly after by Judge Peter Lott, and this was after Dr. Birdsall was found to be, he was found to have an ownership position in a competing refinery in San Francisco, and so because of that conflict of interest, he was relieved of his position. And here's a photo of the building that we're in tonight as it looked in the 1850s. Augustin Heresy was one of the first mint's most interesting characters. After some time in San Diego and some time in the state legislature, he came to San Francisco in 1853. He went into the refining business immediately with some fellow Hungarians and then worked for Adams and Company, which is one of Wells Fargo's main competitors. And I have this evening a couple items. Well, there's Mr. Heresy, that show, that are from the time that he worked at Adams and Company and from the same time period there, and we're going to look at those shortly. He was appointed as assayer at the mint in 1854 and began as the melter and refiner in 1855. He was a property owner, a venologist, amongst other pursuits. His work with the mint soon encountered some scandal, however. It was found that typically in the refining process, about 3% of the product was lost to, let's say, impurities of the metal and so forth. During Mr. Heresy's time as the melter and refiner, he was experiencing a 5% loss. So there were early on fingers that were pointed to him as to the whereabouts of this missing gold. Now, early on in his position, his managers had him, working this building 24 hours a day. There was so much gold coming in that here at the mint they couldn't keep up, and sometimes the depositors of this gold dust and nuggets had to wait a week or 2 weeks to get their payment because it was taking that long for them to process. So Heresy started running a 24-hour operation. And as it relates to his addressing the concerns that people had about the loss over and above what his predecessors were experiencing, his explanation was, we're running these furnaces very hot. They're running 24 hours a day. There's massive heat is generating these windstorms that go up our chimneys, and we think that there may be some gold dust that is being lost through the chimney. And sure enough, when they looked at some of the buildings next door to the mint, they were finding gold dust and on buildings as far away as 200 and 300 yards. However, this explanation wasn't good enough for the authorities here at the mint. They ended up telling Mr. Heresy a couple years into his service that he was responsible for about $152,000 loss of gold. And Mr. Heresy, who was a prominent person in the community, also a successful person in the community, he owned property in San Mateo County in the Crystal Springs area. He owned his home here in San Francisco, another piece of property in San Francisco. And due to his interest in wine, he also owned some property in the Sonoma, Napa area. He had to deed some of that property to the mint while this issue was in the court system. A couple years later, he was exonerated of any wrongdoing. However, damage to his reputation was done. Another problem that he had after he got his deeds back to the property, he had to surrender to the government for this loss of gold, was there were squatters on his property. And so he had the expenditure of time and resources to go and evacuate the squatters from his property that was previously deeded to the government. Mr. Heresey's accomplishments for the California wine industry were also significant. At one point, he went to Europe and brought back from Europe some rootstocks that were used in the California wine industry because he could see that the area up in what we call now the winemaking area had potential for making wines that could compete with some of the best wines in Europe. And so he is considered one of the pioneers for his work for California wines. And there's a picture of Mr. Heresey. And here are the two Adams and Company items that I brought tonight. The first item is a check made payable to two initials. I think it's hard to see some of the writing, but I think it's JR, and that would be for $50, signed by a J. Barker. It could be made payable to himself, possibly. And the second item is a receipt for a deposit of $120 by John Major. This is dated October 2nd, 1854. Mr. Heresey would have been already employed at this mint at that time, but the first item is dated 1853, and Heresey would have been at Adams and Company at that time. And this is just a recap of the details on the two items that I brought, the two paper items. So this is another photo of the coin because now we get to talk about the tragedy of the SS Central America. America's vast expanse was difficult to navigate. If you wanted to come across our country, you had two choices. You could take it's stagecoach, and it's actually very expensive. It took a lot of time, and you had to deal with hostiles and also topographical challenges like Grand Canyons and large rivers and mountains and salt flats and so forth. Another way it was done was taking a ship down to Central America using the Panama Railroad, and then taking a ship up to the other coast, whichever way you were going to, whatever your destination was. On Thursday, August 20th, 1857, 578 passengers and crew embarked on a journey from San Francisco to New York. They took the Sonora down the Pacific coast to Panama. They took a train across the isthmus to the Atlantic side of Panama, the Panama Railroad, and we have a quick photo of the Panama Railroad, maybe a little bit further down in our slides here. And then they took a ship north along the east coast to the desired port, and that's where they were on the SS Central America. Here this slide shows the route from San Francisco to Central America, and then up and through between Cuba and Florida and to New York. Now, prior to that railroad, many people that were trying to get to New York and didn't want to go the overland route would have to go all the way around Cape Horn, and you can see that's quite a circuitous route. It added 3 to 4 weeks on the trip in comparison to the Central America route. The Sonora reaches Panama City on the morning of September 3rd. Passengers and cargo are transferred to the Panama Railway for the journey to Aspinwall. And here's that slide of the Panama Railroad here. Awaiting them was the 280-foot-long SS Central America. And it had completed 43 trips up the East Coast between New York and Central America by this time in 1857. Its captain was W.L. Herndon. And amazingly enough, I always think just the logistics of a whole ship, everyone getting off, all the cargo, and then getting on a train, loading up a train and taking a 4-hour train ride, and then loading up the SS Central America on the Atlantic coast. They did it in one day because at 4 p.m. on September 3rd, they left Aspinwall and they were in Cuba by September 7th. On the morning of September 8th, the SS Central America leaves Cuba and immediately counters a perfect hurricane. Because of this hurricane, many of the passengers were sick in their respective cabins. Friday, September 11th, the storm is as violent as the day before. The ship starts taking on water. It lists to starboard, which is to the right, and soon the crew is having a hard time loading their boilers with coal. The fire rooms begin to flood, and the ship is now at the mercy of the sea. Once you lose your propulsion in a ship, you can no longer steer the ship into the waves, and you're at the mercy of these waves. And in a hurricane, these are 30 and 40-foot waves. And so it does even more damage to a ship that's in this position. The captain orders all men to form a bucket brigade, and this bucket brigade lasts 30 hours. September 12th is slightly clearer, but the damage has been done. A ship called the Marine is spotted on the horizon, allowing for potential rescue. Captain Herndon launches lifeboats for the women and children. And then he retreats to his cabin to return, donning full dress uniform, vowing to go down with the ship. Gold becomes a liability. And as many as you can probably imagine, when we go on a trip, we usually have a couple pieces of luggage, but we really have no need to take all of our money with us. We have credit cards and checks and so forth. And they did have checks in 1857. However, when you were going somewhere for a significant period of time, your wealth was brought in coin form. And oftentimes paper traded at a discount to coin, whether it was paper checks or currency, particularly currency traded at a discount to coin. And so you had passengers that had felt that there was imminent danger, and they realized they would soon be swimming, and the prospect of carrying around maybe two or three or four or more pocketfuls of gold coins quickly became undesirable. And so you have stories of people ditching their money belts and their sacks full of coins on deck, getting ready to jump in the water. The ship plunges into the sea 8 p.m. on Saturday, September 12th at a 45-degree angle. And here we have a photo that shows the SS Central America. You have some debris in the water. You have some survivors here clinging to life. You have some trying to find the high ground on the upper left-hand corner of the ship here. You have folks that are down here. So a dangerous situation here. Hundreds of passengers are flung into the water. The ship, the Marine, saves over 100 of the passengers from the SS Central America. Later on in that evening, the Ellen arrives, which is a Norwegian ship, saves some additional survivors. Of the entire group on board, 153 people did survive and 425 people perished. News of the disaster spreads via telegraph, and the sinking of the Central America is one of the significant factors leading to the financial panic of 1857. So fast forward to about 130 years later, Tommy Thompson, who's a treasure hunter, leads a group to find the SS Central America at the bottom of the sea. September 11th, 1988, almost 131 years to the day, the side wheel showing SS Central America is found at the bottom of the ocean. Fields of gold coins and bars are strewn on the bottom of the ocean. And hundreds of various denominations are represented in this particular treasure. And here is a photo of the coins as they appeared on the ocean floor. You can see someone had a $1 coin earlier today. That's a $1 size coin. These are 20s right here. These are 20s stacked together amongst the sea urchins and the sand and the rocks. This photo is the coins after they've been brought up from the ocean. You could see they're more visibly appealing. So the coins went through a salvage and restoration process whereby crates with compartments were sunk down into the ocean. A robotic arm that was rubberized, the hand was rubberized, would grasp the coins and put them into the compartments, and they were covered with a foam that after a certain period of time would harden. And that's how they were able to safely get these items from the bottom of the ocean, hundreds of feet up to the surface. After which, they consulted with some restoration companies that were able to remove some of the verdigris and the tarnish that was on the surface of the coins from being on the ocean floor for so long, and get them into a condition that they were acceptable in the numismatic community. What's so important in numismatics is having original surfaces of the coin. And these processes that they were able to put these coins through, they were successful in maintaining those very important surfaces. Now we're going to transition to the second mint here in San Francisco on 5th and Mission Street. This is one of my favorite photos of the second mint. This comes from about 1930. We're going to look at two silver dollars, 1878S and 1921S. And these were the first and the last Morgan dollars produced by this building. Silver dollar production spanned 44 years at the second San Francisco Mint, and coins made in 28 of those years. So not every single year did San Francisco Mint make a silver dollar. And I chose the silver dollars because I believe that their versatility, dependability, recognizability, and beauty really tell the story of San Francisco in this time period. And here are the two coins here. You can see they look very similar. This is the obverse, of course, 1878, 1921. And the reverse, much like the $20 coin, you can see the S here in between D and O of dollar. And you can see one over here as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about some small design changes in the eagle, but otherwise the coins look very similar. The architect of the Old Mint, Alfred B. Mullet, the Old Mint was his most important work in the classical revival style, and it was intended to be the most secure building in the western United States, designed to withstand earthquakes and other natural disasters. Construction begins in 1869, and the walls, amazingly enough, were 5 feet thick at the base and taper up to 4 feet. And you think a wall is that thick, that's a pretty sturdy building. May 25th of 1870, the cornerstone was laid with much speculation as to an exact location. I was able to view newspaper clippings of this event, and it was covered in the newspaper, San Francisco newspaper, and there were dignitaries there and officials of the Mint, and the mayor was there. But somehow, in the telling of the story, they forgot to include exactly where the cornerstone lies. And it's still a question that has a lot of speculation around it to this day. We do know that there are some very rare coins in that cornerstone, but its exact location is a mystery. November 5th, 1874, the Old Mint is open for business, and it's the largest mint in the world at that time. San Francisco in the 1870s had a population of 149,000. The Transcontinental Railroad had recently been completed, and many thought that it would bring prosperity to the city. However, goods were transported more cheaply via this railroad, and that reduced San Francisco's importance as a port. Further, the economic panic of 1873 primarily affected the East Coast, but sent many workers looking for positions on the West Coast, which of course lowered wages. In the early 1870s, there were over 100 millionaires in San Francisco, many of these worth over $5 million. And you have to think that in 1870s, $1 million was a princely sum. Most of the folks had gained this wealth through Nevada mining and speculating in mining shares and so forth. However, by 1876, much of this stock speculation the stock market went down, and the number of millionaires was halved, and many of these previously millionaires were on the verge of bankruptcy. The 1878 coin was the first year of the Morgan design. There was a silver dollar produced at the Old Mint in 1875, 6, and 7. It was the trade dollar. But the Morgan dollar was a new design, and it was a function of the Bland-Allison Act, which passed in 1878. And the reverse has a thin eagle with wings spread, $1, and In God We Trust. The mintage of the 1878 coin was 9.8 million coins. And one thing about the 1878 that's slightly different than the 1921 is the breast feathers of the eagle are somewhat concave, whereas in every coin 1879 and after, those breast feathers are convex. So just one little tidbit about the 1878 coin. Fast forward to 1906. The Mint had been open 32 years, and on the morning of April 18th, 1906, at 5 in the morning, an earthquake strikes, a massive earthquake. Superintendent Frank Leach, who we'll talk about in a moment, estimates that San Francisco had about 400,000 inhabitants at this point. U.S. Census figures show us 342,000 in the year 1900 and 417,000 in the year 1910. So 400 seems about right. The United States is experiencing a large wave of immigration that started about 20 years previously and continues past 1906. Primarily folks from Western and Eastern Europe were coming to the United States at this time. Many, including some members of my family, decided San Francisco was going to work for them and got to San Francisco all the way across the United States from New York. The earthquake that struck that day caused fires that reached downtown by midday. Superintendent Leach woke up that day at his home in Oakland and saw some destruction in the Oakland streets, but didn't think it was that big of a deal until he started to try to get on the ferry to come to San Francisco to go to work that day. At the Oakland Ferry Building, he found that he wasn't able to take a ferry to San Francisco. Only people leaving San Francisco could come to Oakland, not the other way around. He waits a day and tries to go to take the ferry the next morning on April 19th. He realizes that people are being turned away. He finds an official at the ferry building. He explains the situation. I'm the superintendent of the United States Mint. I need to get to work today. We've got an emergency in San Francisco. They make a ferry for him and take him over. Except when he arrives at the ferry building that day, he's not able to just walk up Market Street. Okay, there's fires going on. He has to go northwest around and up Sacramento Street further, and then cross Market more towards where Fifth is. And what he finds is a skeleton crew of his employees that are waiting for him at the Mint. But they all know that there's going to be some firefighting that's going to happen here shortly. The Old Mint has a cistern or it used to have a cistern. It's no longer there. And they had an on-site supply of fresh water. He instructs one of his employees to fix a pump so that water can be pumped up to the roof. And he has some of his employees stationed on the roof because they can see that a fire is coming from the northeast as well as from the west. At one point, the fire is at the Emporium building across the street from the Mint. It also is at the building that's next door to the Mint on the same side of 5th Street. Mr. and Superintendent Leach has his men close the shutters. There's iron shutters on all the windows. He has them close those. He's having them watering down the roof because as this fire continues to gain momentum, it's creating its own sort of hurricane of debris and heat and fire. And at some point, he has to pull his men off the roof because the fire is too intense. They spray off the copper sheathing that's covering the roof, but it's a thin layer of copper sheathing. Underneath that is all flammable material, roofing material. And so he gets his people, and this is where the firestorm, and they're closed up in the Mint and they're crossing their fingers. At some point, closely thereafter, pulling those employees off the roof, he hears some explosions. And it's the facade of the building. Okay, it's sandstone and it's superheated and it's exploding off the side of the building. So there was some significant damage being done to the facade of the building, the outer area, the outer stonework. However, the old Mint was, due to the acts of Superintendent Leach and his team, the firestorm passes, the winds change, and the building is saved. He sends his employees back up to the roof. They put out a couple spot fires from debris that had fallen from this firestorm, but they're able to extinguish the fires that are on the roof. The Mint is the only financial building to survive the destruction. And this is a picture looking at the Mint from the east, and it just shows the destruction. You can see some skeletons of buildings in the background to the left and to the right, and the amount of destruction in the foreground. You can also see some tents that were placed, and some people, several different tents on this side of the building here. The Mint, in addition to having hundreds of millions of dollars stored in its vaults, Superintendent Leach realized, I'm one of the few places that has water, fresh water, and provisions. He had an employee that had some restaurant experience. They opened a restaurant 3 days after the earthquake. At first, the meals were free, but after, he was charging a nominal fee for folks to be able to come in and have something to eat. And weeks later, restaurants started popping up as people started getting into rebuilding mode, but certainly the old Mint and Superintendent Leach's efforts to help feed and keep water available to the survivors was instrumental. In reading Superintendent Leach's memoirs, he makes some estimates. One of his estimates was that 1/3 of the population of San Francisco was lost after the earthquake. People either had their residences burned to the ground, or due to fear, they didn't want to come back and have there be another earthquake. He further estimates that this population was recovered fairly quickly. In 5 years, he estimates, as the resources spent on rebuilding lead to jobs and related financial activity. Another misconception in his book was that after the vaults cooled, other financial institutions there would be demand for cash, when in fact, Superintendent Leach writes that most financial institutions were net recipients of money as opposed to money flowing out of those institutions. So just an interesting tidbit. Fast forward to 1920, San Francisco's population about 506,000 people. World War I ended 3 years earlier. The financial boom associated with the ending of the war, with the World War, production of small value coins increased as the end of the decade approached. So 1916, 1917, 1918, 1919, 1920, a lot of the smaller value coins were produced in great quantities. Silver prices increased such that the bullion value was higher than their face value as we approached the early 20s. And so you would say, well, I have this silver dollar, but if I take it to this refiner, he's going to give me $1.15. I'm just going to collect all the silver dollars I can and have them melted. And that's what a lot of folks were doing. Great Britain appeals to the United States for a silver loan in an attempt to drive down the price of silver. And this is accomplished through the Pittman Act, which resulted in the minting of 87.6 million new silver dollars in 1921. San Francisco's share of that production was 21.7 million silver dollars, 1921s. And here again is a photo of the 2 silver dollars. And here's my bibliography. Really enjoyed reading these books. And my photo credits. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank
you. All right. We're moving into the next phase, which is we start with questions. And I see a hand up already, so if you get the microphone over to Angus, who's wearing his favorite Haight-Ashbury t-shirt.
Thank you very much. In terms of $1857, what was the value of the gold lost on the Central America?
That's an excellent question. There were, the exact figure in terms of $1857, so there was, I think I need to look that up because the gross figure, I don't know. I know there was 10,000 coins lost, not including bars. And so likely $100 million, but I don't know the exact figure.
A follow-up, if I may?
Please.
You said that the loss of the gold on the Central America was one of the contributing causes to the Panic of 1857. What were the other causes to the panic?
Well, one of the other causes was agricultural products. There was a glut of some of the agricultural products from Europe. And so, there was an oversupply, and so the prices of many of those agricultural products decreased, and that caused many of the farmers to not experience the revenues they would have experienced otherwise.
Catherine.
Tommy Thompson and his crew, when they found all of that gold, did they have the rights to it? They were able to keep it and keep the value of it?
They were able to keep that and sell it into the numismatic community. There were several parties that had a claim to what was taken out. There was the salvage company. There was Tommy Thompson. There may have been some insurance companies that paid out the claim in 1857. And so the whole prospect and process of bringing these treasures up from the bottom of the ocean is very expensive. And it takes a lot of technology, planning. You've got to find it. And so they were doing, quite a bit of, research and searching before 1988. It took them years just to find the Central America.
So no government owned this gold?
Not to my knowledge.
Catherine, pass it back. We have one question in the second row. And then up front, when you're finished, pass it back to the young man.
If you remember, what 2 gold coins did you purchase?
I remember. You mean when yes. So it was 3 coins. One was a I think there was two $20 gold pieces, common dates, lightly circulated, and a $50 gold eagle, dated 1995 or something.
Is there any hope of finding something useful to do with the old second Old Mint building?
That's an excellent question. As I mentioned in my introduction, I did organize the show there between 2009 and 2014. The reason that we did not organize the show after 2014 is the Mint was no longer available to us. They decided to not have our events there anymore. I had heard that a different party took over the management of that building and was again holding events there, but there might be someone in the room who could better answer that question.
I'll take a piece of that at least. When we stopped having shows there, almost simultaneously, they started having parties there. And so there was a number of parties that were held there with bands and dancing and whatever else. And I believe, and I'm just speculating, there was more value. We spent a lot of time as a historical society in doing the upgrades, the safety upgrades, the lighting for exit signs and all that kind of stuff. We met all those requirements, and essentially the city pulled the rug out from under us and found a better, a more profitable way of using the building. Now, I have no idea today what the current status is of that, because I don't know if those rock parties are going on.
Non Plus Ultra that runs the Old Mint, and they have weddings and parties and events, and it's the way that I think people figured out it could sustain itself and make some money. It was a very, very expensive project to do what needed to be done to turn it into a museum, and without city help or, big private foundation, it couldn't be done.
Called monetizing the Mint.
So rather,
I pass it back to you when unless you want to finish your question.
so rather like the Hibernia Bank building a little bit further uptown, the only thing they figured out to do with it was an event space. And the other thing was the Adams and Company, which Mr. Harasi worked for. Did that later become Adams Express?
I'm not sure. It sounds right, but I'm not sure about the history of the company after the 1850s.
Because if Adams and Company later became Adams Express, would you believe it later became a mutual fund? It did.
So I want to change the subject back to the Granite Lady. The Cornerstone allegedly has some very rare coins, including an 1870s $3 gold piece, of which there's only one known, which was in the Bass collection. They have just been sold. Do you think there really are coins there, or do you think that somebody took them out? That one that's known to the public is the one that might have been in the Cornerstone?
When I first organized the show there in 2009, that was probably the most common asked question. I spent a lot of time in that building. We did 10 shows there. And just in walking around there, I have to think that it's still there, because if you get down in the basement and you see the stonework that's down there and the size and girth of these stones,
The massive stone.
it's just amazing. And any excavation, I would think it would be fairly easy to see, and it would be obvious.
And follow.
Sure.
If we had found that coin, that would have paid for the museum.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to go 1, 2.
Do you agree with them not making pennies anymore?
In this country? Oh, you mean if they were to stop making pennies? I think it would be good for coin collectors. It would get more people interested, I think. I think
Those credit cards that get in the way.
Good question.
I have a question.
Do you personally have any rare coins in your possession? Do you collect them for yourself?
I do. I have a modest collection. Most of the coins that I brought the $20 gold coin here today so that people can see it. This is the coin that I spoke about in my presentation. It was at the bottom of the ocean, 131 years, and I feel lucky to have it. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon. Is anyone that owns things that are special to them, the further I get into life, I realize we have to realize a detachment for these things. We can't take these things with us. All we can do is enjoy them while we're the keepers of them, and eventually they're going to go to someone else. But yes, I have a modest collection. Most things are for sale. I still do about 24 coin shows a year. It's mostly weekend type stuff. And I feel blessed that I can do something that I would call work that I enjoy so much.
Let me take the question. Would you do value, how much you paid for it, and how much value today, or how long you've had it?
The best way for me to answer that question is, I think, if I remember, I've had this coin about 8 or 10 years. It's worth, I think, about $6,000. So not hugely valuable. For me, it's the story. And
The story.
Yeah, it's the story.
You have a question over there? You want to get to that?
Okay.
Oh, they're passing the other. I didn't
Okay.
because
Quick question. Thank you for that interesting presentation. Gold, of course, is discovered in 1849. Was it banks like Adams and Company and others that were then transporting gold out of the area to be minted? And if so, where was the gold going? And then who was minting it, I guess, back east, whether it's New York or whatever? And you showed us the 56 coin. Is that the first year that coins were minted here, or is it? I know this building, I think, opens in 54. So when did they start minting coins here in this building?
1854, as the answer to the first question. I don't think they made any 20s that year. I know they made some 10s that year. $10 gold piece was made in 1854. They made an 1855 S20. I know, I've owned one before. And most of the years afterwards. Let's see, your other question was, in the years before this mint, several private organizations popped up and filled that need of, hey, I've got a bunch of gold dust and nuggets. I need to buy something. I don't want to get ripped off. You don't want to get ripped off. Let's take it over to Wasp Molitor, or let's take it over to some of the other private mints that were here in San Francisco, and let's have them melt it down for us. We'll pay them 1.5%, and we'll get some coins that we can actually spend. And everyone knows how much these are.
And what does the U.S. government think about that?
Well, they decided that they needed to have this building.
Why? Just tell them why.
Well, one of the things that residents need is enough coinage to justify all the commerce that's happening. It gets a little tough when you have to say, hey, I'd like to buy lunch, and will you take this oil lamp in exchange for lunch or something like that? I mean, the barter happens, and then and there was already coins where there weren't enough already in the West Coast in the years leading up to the gold rush. And so all that activity just made this situation worse.
And uniformity of value, of course.
Right.
You have a question in the far back, and then we'll move it forward.
Getting away somewhat from the practical historical approach to a more realistic approach. Obviously, we went off the gold standard, and the government wanted all the gold back, and most of the Italians just socked it away at the Bank of America in North Beach in their safe deposit boxes. So there are still a lot of gold coins floating around. But I guess the question I'm going to ask is, the value of a gold coin today, common, is it more because of the history of the coin? Are they still being used as ornamentation or jewelry? I can remember there was a time when your mother and my wife wore $20 gold coins around their neck on a bezel that they got from Uncle Torito or somebody, Is there still a market for that kind of gold coin? Is it still being used as jewelry?
Excellent, good question. Just to bring the group up to speed, Jack and my family go back 50 years or so. I'm glad to have him in the room today.
You were about born.
Certainly gold is used as jewelry, although as one of my good San Francisco friends once told me, we were walking down Valencia Street and I had a pocket watch on. He goes, and a vest. He goes, take that pocket watch off, put it in your pocket. You don't need to have that out here. And so I think as gold continues to go up, we just reached another high, I think yesterday, over $2,600 an ounce. It gets a little bit more dicey to wear this stuff out in public. Yes, gold drives the value of things, but to answer what I think was your first question, there are coins that are just for the gold. Like say, we talked about American Eagle. They trade 3% above the spot price, 2% above the spot price. But then there are some coins like this coin that it melts for $2,600, but it has a value of more than double that because it's conditioned. And there's the fact that there's only several thousand, several hundred, tens of thousands of this coin made. And so that creates demand for that particular coin because there's hundreds of people that collect this stuff.
So if someone had at home, for sake of an argument, I'm not saying who, a bracelet with 10s and 5s on it, or cufflinks made out of 2.5s, or the big 20 on a bezel, there is still a market for that coin as a coin or as a piece of jewelry?
It depends. I handled a family friend. He had something similar where his wife had this thing and it went around the wrist and it had a bunch of, and these were not $2.50 gold pieces. She had a couple 20s on there, $10 gold piece. And I paid this guy a lot of money for this, but typically for jewelry pieces, these coins are, you wear them to parties and then, I think I'll shine up my $20 gold piece before I go out to the party tonight. I'm wearing this thing and
the value.
Right. A lot of the collectability can go away. Not always. Sometimes people either never wore it or didn't clean it. And then there could be some rarity value associated with that. But most of the time, jewelry coins there's not as much collector value for that reason. They get shined up or they get knocked around and so forth.
Jack, pass it forward, and then we've got one in front of us as well.
Very
nice.
You began your presentation with the lithograph that you pointed out. There's a better copy on the wall right there.
Right there.
Of San Francisco in 1847. If you look carefully at the caption, it identifies 3 ships in the harbor that were part of Stevenson's regiment, which came from New York around the Horn in 1846, 1847, full of soldiers to fight to snatch California from Mexico in the Mexican-American War. Among the men on that ship was a gentleman by the name of Samuel Haight, who, after hostilities had ended, they were discharged from their military obligation. He, being a very astute businessman, with other partners, went into a banking business, which included a private minting service. And this was just as gold was coming down from the hills in nugget form, in dust form. And in terms of current transactions, it was very imprecise, unreliable. So he and his partners opened the Miners Bank right up here on Washington and Kearny Street and began the first private minting of coins in California. And it was so early that they didn't have the mechanical presses to stamp the coin, so they used the old sledgehammer method, which is pound the coin to get the impression. They minted $5, $10 coins, but they did not have government authorization. They weren't cheating anybody, but they didn't have the government certificate or backing of this is a reliable U.S. currency. So they had to stop doing that, but they did mint enough coins that they were in circulation. There are some still in existence today. And I looked on the internet that one coin, I don't know how many there are in existence, but one coin is available, $10 gold piece, for $186,000.
Yeah, that's rare.
Pass it forward, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank
Did other coins other than gold coins get minted here? And then related, once this mint opened, how long did the private jewelers, assayers, minters last?
Well, to answer your first question, yes, silver coins were produced here, half dollars, quarters, I think, and various other denominations produced here. Your second question, there was a period of time where some of the private mints, I believe, were operating in conjunction with this mint. And I don't know how long they lasted, however, after that time period. 57. Thank you.
Question in front, then goes back. Okay.
What advice would you give to a young coin collector who's just getting started?
Thank you. This is our new generation, our next generation right here. So I want to give you a round of applause for coming tonight on a school night.
It's good, simple.
So a couple different things. One, I would say what they've found is that people that buy books of items that interest them and read those books not only stay around as a collector for longer, but also are more successful and have more fun. So to the extent that you can find a book, and there are a lot of wonderful books out there about a topic that interests you, buy it and enjoy it. I also have a saying that in terms of your collecting activities, and it goes like this: the astute collector that educates himself or herself and makes prudent purchases over at least the medium term will be rewarded handsomely. And so that talks to that education that we talked about, reading books, spending time in the hobby. A lot of folks I see want to come in the hobby and they want to do well right away. It takes some time. You're building up your knowledge, your experience, your contacts. And then, of course, it talks about
education.
Education, right?
We have a question back here.
Do you know where the two chimneys are that are located on this piece of property? And then I have another unrelated question.
I don't know where the two chimneys are here. I would probably...
I don't know. Because there was a building built all around above us, there's no chimneys here. The two that we saw in that picture were the two chimneys at the second mint at 5th and Mission. And I think they're still there, as far as I know. I know they've been cleaned to make sure there was no value in those chimneys. But that picture that Scott showed, those were the two chimneys. You're going to add one more.
I had one other question.
Well, I can answer that question. This building is not the building that was shown. That building was torn down after the movement in 1873 to the granite lady. Then this building was built on top of that building. And originally, that building was actually the mint for the private minter, Moffat and Company. The government bought it.
Oh, that's right.
And
I remember seeing that. Right, right.
So this is a different building, the same location.
Okay, there we go. And I think you had a second question.
Do you know any information regarding the private museum at in the basement of the Bank of California that is now closed to the public? Do you know anything about that, if ever we could be able to see the contents again? That was a wonderful place to visit.
It was. I led a tour there, but I think Lana has some updates on that.
Yeah, so that collection, we actually talked with Union Bank about either gaining loan, borrowing some of their collection. Unfortunately, when they were bought by a U.S. bank, that collection was divested to them as part of the sale. And it's in a couple of warehouses right now, safely ensconced. We're still in discussions with them to see if they might consider loaning us a portion of that or giving us a portion of that to display here, because it really does belong here. And it really tells the story of early San Francisco. And so we're trying pretty hard to see if anything can be done for that.
I have a question. Who was Morgan?
He was the designer of the Morgan dollar.
No sexy backstory.
I don't know as much as I should know about him.
And a question from our online audience. Since cleaning a coin is such a bad thing, how can the SSCA coins being processed be not considered clean?
The SS Central America coins were restored in such a way that they were able to improve the appearance of the coin without that process being detrimental to the original surfaces of the coin.
It wasn't wire brushed. We'll know that part.
No, it wasn't wire brushed. It's a combination of non-friction, solution, and know-how and experience.
No other questions from the viewing audience? Jack has one question back there.
Just to add, a lot of people share hobbies and share fascinations. If your fascination is coins and mints, and you have a fascination with old toy trains, the Lionel Corporation years ago celebrated all of the mints by issuing a series of cars to go behind your 1965-70 Lionel with the various mints. And I happen to have a set, so they're just kind of fun to have. So it's amazing how many mints there were. I mean, we live here, we're kind of spoiled because we've got 3 buildings or 4 buildings that at one time were mints. But when you think about there was Carson City and all these other places that we've long forgotten.
Philadelphia.
It's just, if you like toy trains and you like coins and you like mints, you might want to just go buy yourself some Lionel train cars and have some fun with them.
All right. Any other questions from the online audience? No? Okay. With that, we are closing one of the more interesting programs that we have presented. It's always a thrill to allow us to tip into your passion.
Thank you.
Other passions in this as well.
Thank you.
All right.